COVID, Boris Johnson resisted autumn lockdown as only over-80s dying, Dominic Cummings. Boris Johnson was reluctant to tighten COVID restrictions as cases rose last autumn because he thought people dying from it were essentially all over 80, Dominic Cummings has claimed. Mr. Johnson had wanted to let COVID wash through the country rather than destroy the economy, Mr. Cummings said. The claims came in an interview with BBC political editor Laura Kuenssberg. It is the first time Mr. Cummings, Mr. Johnson's former chief advisor, has given a one-on-one TV interview during his career in politics. In response, Downing Street said the Prime Minister had taken the necessary action to protect lives and livelihoods, guided by the best scientific advice throughout the pandemic. And the government had prevented the NHS from being overwhelmed through 3 national lockdowns, a spokesperson added. In a wide-ranging interview, Mr. Cummings also said that, near the start of the pandemic last year, Mr. Johnson had wanted to keep his weekly face-to-face meetings with the Queen going, but he had to warn his boss that she might die if she caught coronavirus. And he defended his controversial decision to drive to his parents' farm in County Durham after the first lockdown started, but admitted he had not come clean about all the reasons behind it, including security concerns around his family home in London. This is the first major interview Mr. Cummings has given, but he has answered M.P.'s questions on the government's response to COVID. Dominic Cummings, the interview will be broadcast in the UK on BBC Two at 1900 hours BST on Tuesday, and it will be available on BBC iPlayer and BBC Sounds. COVID cases dipped last summer but began to rise rapidly again as autumn started, prompting a debate within government about what measures were needed. Mr. Cummings told the BBC that he, UK Chief Scientific Advisor Sir Patrick Vallance and England's Chief Medical Officer Professor Chris Whitty had pushed for tougher restrictions from mid-September. Sir Patrick and Professor Whitty declined to comment. The Prime Minister had parts of the media and Tory party screaming not to increase restrictions and always referred to the Daily Telegraph, for which he had previously written a column, as parts of the media and Tory party screaming, Mr. Cummings said. On 13th of October, with COVID deaths having risen to more than 100 a day, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer called for a circuit breaker lockdown of 2 to 3 weeks, but the government decided against this. In a WhatsApp message sent on 15th of October, shared with the BBC, Mr. Johnson appears to have described himself as slightly rocked by some of the data on COVID fatalities. The median age for those dying was between 81 and 82 for men and 85 for women, the Prime Minister allegedly wrote, adding, "That is above life expectancy. So get COVID and live longer. And I no longer buy all this NHS overwhelmed stuff." But the Prime Minister announced a 4-week lockdown for England on 31st of October, saying this was needed to protect the NHS as figures suggested deaths could reach several thousand a day without several thousand a day. Looking back to the start of the pandemic, Mr. Cummings told the BBC he had intervened to stop Mr. Johnson continuing to see the Queen, then aged 93, for weekly face-to-face meetings. Mr. Cummings claimed that, on 18th of March last year, the PM had said, "I'm going to see the Queen." He added that he had told Mr. Johnson, "There's people in this office who are isolating. What if you go and see her and give the Queen coronavirus?" He continued, "I just said, if you give her coronavirus and she dies, what are you going to do?" On 27th of March last year, 4 days after the first lockdown began, Mr. Cummings drove his wife and son from London to his parents' farm in County Durham. While staying there, he made a 30-mile road journey to Barnard Castle on 12th of April, which he later said had been to test his eyesight before the 260-mile drive back to London. When these details were revealed, they provoked huge anger and accusations of double standards at a time when the government had banned all but essential long-distance travel. He also said he had decided to move his family to County Durham before his wife fell ill with suspected COVID because of security concerns over his home in London. Asked why he had given a story that was not the 100% truth when he held a special press conference in the Downing Street Rose Garden on 25th of May, Mr. Cummings admitted that not the 100% truth. Mr. Cummings was repeatedly challenged throughout the interview to back up his version of events. A Downing Street spokesperson said, "Since the start of the pandemic, the Prime Minister has taken the necessary action to protect lives and livelihoods, guided by the best scientific advice. The government he leads has delivered the fastest vaccination rollout in Europe, saved millions of jobs through the furlough scheme and prevented the NHS from being overwhelmed through 3 national lockdowns." COVID, Ivermectin, milk among Indonesia's unproven cures. With the surge of the Delta variant in Indonesia, misleading claims about products claiming to be cures and preventions are on the rise. There have been growing numbers of Indonesians sharing claims about using the anti-parasitic drug, Ivermectin. Interest surged after local media reports said incorrectly that the Indonesian authorities had granted it emergency approval. But the drug is still undergoing trials, and is so far unproven as a cure for COVID. The reports were based on a 15th of July statement issued by the Food and Drugs Authority of Indonesia, BPOM. But shortly afterwards, POM's head, Penny Lukito, told local media that no emergency approval had been given to Ivermectin. Ms. Lukito explained that Ivermectin was included because it's undergoing clinical trials at 8 hospitals, but the results are not expected until October and no approval has been given so far. Ivermectin was already being promoted as a treatment by some public figures, despite the World Health Organization's (WHO) warning that it should be used only under certain clinical settings. Health practitioner Reza Gunawan has been promoting Ivermectin on his Twitter account, where he has more than 350,000 followers. The manufacturer, Merck, has said that there is no scientific study as yet that proves Ivermectin works against COVID-19. This happened after claims emerged on social media and WhatsApp groups that drinking this brand of milk could produce COVID antibodies. It is unclear where this claim originated, and there's no evidence that drinking milk can produce COVID antibodies. Nestlé in Indonesia told the BBC that the company has never claimed their product can generate a COVID antibody response, which can only come from a vaccine or a previous infection. Social media posts are being widely shared about a product called Propolis, described as an immunity booster. These have been circulating on Twitter and Facebook, with many claiming that the product helps protect you against COVID-19. It has been certified for sale in Indonesia since 2018 as a traditional medicine and health supplement by the country's food and drugs regulator. British Propolis, as it's known in Indonesia, has an official Instagram account where claims have been made that it can help against viruses, but not specifically COVID-19. There is no evidence that it does anything to prevent COVID infections. We contacted the company marketing the product in Indonesia to ask them about it, but had received no response by the time of publication. There have been lots of claims about immunity boosters during the pandemic, not just in Indonesia but in many other countries. About the claims you can prevent COVID this way. He says the term immunity booster is very general, and there's no evidence these substances work against COVID. We've also seen claims being shared on social media around using other natural remedies against COVID in Indonesia. Again, this product is not shown to work against COVID-19. COVID, Asia follows global shares slide amid recovery fears. Stock markets across the world have dropped on fears that increasing numbers of COVID cases will hamper economic recovery. In Asia, Japan's Nikkei 225 index was down by around 1% in Tuesday's trade to hit its lowest level in 6 months. In New York, the Dow Jones Industrial Average tumbled by more than 2%, while major indexes in the UK and mainland Europe also fell. New cases are rising in some countries, fueled by the Delta variant. Japanese shares are now down for a fifth session in a row over concerns about the spread of the highly contagious Delta variant and that the Tokyo Olympics could worsen the health crisis. Benchmark indexes in Hong Kong, mainland China, South Korea and Australia were also trading lower. Investors are concerned that the rapid spread of the Delta variant will derail the trajectory of the global recovery, notably in Asia, which still has relatively low vaccination rates and where some widely used vaccines do not appear overly effective against it. Jeff Halley, senior market analyst, from Rwanda told the BBC. "I believe we are in for a messy week ahead, with markets being driven around by sentiment and not data, as the international economic calendar is very quiet," he added. Meanwhile, businesses in the UK have described how they are cutting opening hours, closing shops or may have to reduce production as employees are forced to self-isolate after being alerted by the NHS COVID-19 app. Optimism, which had been on the horizon just a few weeks ago, has again been obscured by dark clouds, especially with the snap decision to enforce a 10-day quarantine for arrivals from France, said Susanna Streeter, senior investment and markets analyst at Hargreaves Lansdown. With some scientists warning that infections could reach 200,000 a day by September, there is now a feeling that the UK could be staring at a fresh autumn lockdown, she added. COVID infections linked to the Delta variant have been increasing, but concerns among U.S. investors spiked after Los Angeles imposed an indoor mask mandate again over the weekend.